The OmniBook Ultra is HP's highest-end thin and light laptop. Well, it is back and redesigned and better than ever. This new one, it looks so stylish and it feels very premium. This year you get a choice of two of the best types of processors. You've got Intel's new Panther Lake chips as well as Qualcomm's new Snapdragon X2s. Now, since we value your time at this channel, I'm not going to make you watch this entire video to find out what's going on. I'm just going to tell you right now. The pros of these laptops are their build quality. They also look stunning, as I said. They have this very sharp, vibrant OLED display, and their haptic trackpad is actually better than most of the ones that we've tested in Windows laptops. The Intel model, it wins in battery life, broad application compatibility, and GPU performance. That's of course if you get one with an Intel X7 or X9 chip. Those are the chips that have that powerful B390 integrated GPU. But the Intel model, it does have some fan noise. The Qualcomm model, on the other hand, it comes in that nicer blue color, at least right now here in the USA. It wins in raw CPU performance. Its fans are also much quieter, but it's not perfect either. It feels warmer to the touch. So pick your poison, you get a bit of fan noise over here, and you get a bit of heat you feel over here. By the way, thank you to Best Buy for sending one of these in for our review. We are a Best Buy affiliated channel here, but stating the obvious, this is not a sponsored video. Best Buy, they don't give us any talking points, nor do they review the video before it goes live. Guys, we don't take sponsorships for individual product reviews. That would make no sense. With that said, I'm going to hand off to Sierra. She's going to walk you through these laptops, all their ins and outs, and at the end, she'll go over how they stack up versus the competitors.
The chassis on this new iteration of the Ultra looks very premium. The first word I thought of was sharp. All three colors seem refined, although the new blue and tan ones definitely pop more. The keyboard is color matched to the chassis with squared keys that look very modern. Its brushed metal finish adds to this aesthetic and seems to resist fingerprints well. This laptop is also a nice, compact size. It is around the same size as Lenovo's newest Slim 7X and only a little bigger than something like the MacBook Air 13. It also weighs around the same as both of those. So, it's light, but it's not the lightest out there. Lenovo's more premium Yoga Slim 7i Ultra, which also has a 14-inch screen, is more compact and lightweight. This new OmniBook is also a very thin laptop. Thanks to its thinness, it is very enjoyable to use and rest your wrists on, even though the edges appear to be squared off and sharp when I first looked at them. Instead, it is actually cut at a very slight angle at the edge of the keyboard deck, which means it didn't cut into my wrists. This is relevant if you're using it on a plane or something without support for your arms. The chassis overall feels very sturdy with only minimal deck flex and a little screen flex. The hinges are stiff enough to use the touchscreen, but it can also be opened with one hand. Now let's look at the display, which is a very vivid, color-accurate OLED. It has a high resolution of 2880 by 1800, which is my preference at 14 inches because it makes small text look very crisp and readable, even when zoomed out. This is great for my complex Excel work. Plus, it gets decently bright at almost 500 nits. However, the glossy screen is quite reflective. This would be most noticeable if you were outdoors, on the patio of a coffee shop. I even noticed some reflections on dark-colored content when sitting in my office, which just has normal fluorescent overhead lighting. As this is quite a bright panel, upping the brightness does help combat the reflections when indoors. Unfortunately, there was also a bit of a screen door effect on light-colored content, which means when staring closely, I could see some colored pixels peeking through. We also detected PWM flickering used to control the brightness, but the frequency seems to be very high, so we don't think most people would notice. Both the screen door effect and PWM are very common on OLED panels. The display as a whole is still very solid. The keyboard, on the other hand, is divisive. To me, it felt quite low travel and even a little mushy. I don't mind a low travel keyboard, but I want more resistance to the key presses. This was a bit of a deal breaker for me, but Josh found it okay. He uses the MacBooks a lot, which also have 1mm of key travel. He found the HP's keyboard more satisfying to type on, as the key press feels more clicky. On the downside, it also sounds more clicky, so it is a little louder than the MacBooks. Both of us agreed that it is a much better keyboard than Dell's XPS 14. We didn't have any of the typing errors we had on that one. You can feel where each key ends easier on this one because of their tapered edges. This isn't the case on the XPS. But Josh and I also agreed that the HP's keyboard isn't as comfortable as Lenovo's Yoga series or Asus's ZenBook A14. One area it is better than either of those is its backlight. There isn't enough space for the light to bleed around the keys like it does on those. This makes it easier to see which key is which in a darker environment. The tan version does have lighter keys though, which means having the backlight on in a bright room makes them more difficult to see. Unfortunately, HP doesn't seem to have an auto brightness option, which would turn it off when it's not needed. Trackpad is great. It is an accurate haptic one with very smooth tracking. Clicking feels satisfying but not overly reactive like some haptic ones. Also, drumroll please. None of us experienced any palm rejection issues when typing, even when we had our palms resting directly on the trackpad. This is highly unusual for Windows laptops, so big win. On the other hand, when gaming, Josh noticed his clicks didn't always register. He felt it is one of the best haptic trackpads for a Windows laptop, but not quite MacBook levels. For ports, we have a pretty limited selection of 3 USB-C ports that support up to 40 gigabits and a headphone jack. On the bright side, at least we get a headphone jack, unlike some of its competitors like the Yogas. Also, since the USB-C ports are on both sides, this makes it convenient no matter which side your dock or plug is on. Unfortunately, if you have a USB-A mouse or prefer to use HDMI for your external monitor, you're out of luck here. Speakers get nice and loud and sound very good for this kind of laptop. Solid bass, decent soundstage. Since the speakers angle outwards, you do not lose as much sound as downward-facing speakers if you're using this laptop on a blanket. Take a listen. Here's how the 1440p webcam looks and sounds on the OmniBook Ultra 14. It looks okay, but not as premium as the rest of this laptop. The microphone also sounds off. Here's how the webcam looks in house lighting. Definitely grainier. It also has a privacy shutter and IR for Windows Hello. Now, let's talk about how these two laptops perform. For my daily use, they were fine, but Josh and I both found the Snapdragon model felt snappier. On that one, we noticed no fan noise making graphs and writing scripts. There was a bit of warmth near the top of the keyboard and above the port where it was docked. We measured 40 Celsius. I didn't notice the warmth, but Josh found it a little annoying. On the Intel one, even in lighter use, there was fan noise. It always stayed at a low volume, but it was still there. The plus side of that is that the Intel one didn't feel warm at all for basic use. Let's talk about how long they last when unplugged. With their brightness set to 300 nits, the Intel X9 chip lasted around 12 hours, which is phenomenal, rivaling our current king, the XPS 14. The Snapdragon version still does well, although not as stellar, around 10 hours total. It is a better performing chip, so that may have something to do with it. We'd expect the X2 Plus chip to last longer. If you are running performance tasks unplugged, both OmniBook Ultras retain their full performance. On performance, the exciting thing about both of these new OmniBook Ultras is that they can come with a variety of processors, including ones powerful enough for programming, photo editing, and even some basic video editing. We have the highest end versions of the Intel and Qualcomm chips that are available. Ours perform very well in what we consider our common performance tasks benchmark, Geekbench. Between the two, the Qualcomm one does much better, but neither are bad when you compare to a basic Ultrabook. As far as how the less expensive versions might perform, I looked up Geekbench so that we could see the results of the X2 Plus chip. It performs worse than Intel's X9 in terms of multi-core and a little better in terms of single-core. If you are considering the Intel Ultra 7 356H version, it actually has the same amount of CPU cores as the X9 chip shown here. They're just running at lower clock speeds, so it would likely only fall behind a tiny amount. In Cinebench, it is a similar story to Geekbench, where the Snapdragon pulls ahead. When it comes to the Intel chip specifically, there are better performing laptops with this chip. That is because HP only feeds it around 25 watts of sustained power. There are several other 14-inch laptops not shown here that feed their chips more power and perform better. 40 watts for the Slim 7i Ultra with the better chip, and 45 watts for Asus's ExpertBook. We don't have these in for testing right now, so that's why we're showing you the Yoga Pro 7 and X16 as stand-ins. This also highlights an important point. Qualcomm is more power efficient. It performs better for around the same power draw. If you are comparing to the MacBook Pro 14 with the base M5 chip, it only performs a little better than the Air. That's why we aren't showing you it on our graphs. I felt the graphs were busy enough. Plus, at the time I filmed this, the M5 Pro version is closer in price to the higher-end OmniBook Ultra. As far as graphics performance, you will get a better GPU in the X7 or X9 chips from Intel. The Ultra 7 non-X has less GPU cores. To show you, we've added the Slim 7i Ultra to our graphs, which has the same integrated GPU. In TimeSpy, the Intel X9 version of the OmniBook Ultra performs almost 80% better than its Qualcomm counterpart. Almost all of that is coming down to its better GPU score. But keep in mind, TimeSpy does not run natively on Snapdragon hardware. Steel Nomad Lite is a newer benchmark and runs natively on all hardware, including Qualcomm and Apple. Here, the gap narrows a lot. This is an example of how you may get varying levels of performance on the Snapdragon chips, due to some apps requiring a translation layer to run on Windows on ARM. As you can see, you can get better graphics in the price range though, either with something like the MacBook Pro with the M5 Pro chip, or even better, a laptop with a dedicated NVIDIA GPU. The advantage of a dedicated GPU is also evident in games like Cyberpunk. As far as integrated GPUs go, Intel still does very well here. In terms of what's available in a thin and light laptop, it gets some decent frame rates for high settings. Do keep in mind that we've lowered the screen's output resolution here to 1920 by 1200, and we are using upscaling. This is likely what you'd want to play higher-end games on this type of hardware. Looking at the Snapdragon OmniBook, we don't recommend it for gaming due to its lower performance and app compatibility issues. Cyberpunk, like Time Spy, runs through emulation, and certain games that require anti-cheat software, like League of Legends, don't run at all. Looking at just the Intel in Forza 6, which is a brand new title where we do not utilize upscaling, the Intel version is able to maintain 60 FPS on average at full HD. This is an excellent result, especially considering the OmniBook CPU draws less power than many other laptops with Panther Lake. We didn't bother testing this game on the OmniBook with Qualcomm on this graph because the ZenBook A16 that you see there has a more powerful version of the same chip, and it performs horribly. Graphics performance will also have an effect in tasks like video editing. Playing back one of our 4K videos at half resolution, these OmniBook Ultras drop significantly more frames than other laptops you can get around this price point, either MacBook Pros or laptops with a dedicated GPU. This doesn't mean you can't edit on these. I personally do review our videos and leave markers on the timeline using the Panther Lakes all the time. But I'm playing back at half resolution, and this is not my primary workflow, so a few dropped frames doesn't bother me. Something like photo editing is less intensive and more doable on both of these OmniBook Ultras though, if that's the type of creative work you're interested in. Let's talk about how comfortable the OmniBook Ultra would be to use for performance tasks, like the ones I've just talked about. For pure CPU tasks, the Intel version gets very warm. It's around the same as the MacBook Air, which doesn't have a fan. The Qualcomm version is worse. It gets burning hot. It should really be running its fans higher, but it isn't. This is unfortunate, as I showed you, because Qualcomm's max CPU performance is better, but you can't reasonably use it for that. What surprised me, though, is that when gaming, the Intel doesn't get as warm as it does for pure CPU tasks. This is all while it keeps the fan noise around the same. Overall, these conclusions line up with what Josh and I experienced. The Intel version tends to have more noticeable fan noise, the Qualcomm version feels warmer. We've already talked about light use where we were running on balance mode, and we've shown you our performance results on performance mode. But here's the detail of our Cinebench runs on each mode. What you'll notice on the Intel version is that it gets a big drop in heat and fan noise when stepping down from performance to balanced, but you lose some performance by doing that. The Qualcomm one is still warm even on balanced mode. How is it so warm when it's drawing less power than the Intel variant? For Linux, we've noticed Ubuntu works better for Panther Lake laptops, so we booted it up and a lot of our tests passed, except the microphone and speakers. It didn't detect the microphone even though the webcam worked, and the speaker wouldn't produce sound even though the controls appeared to work. As far as Linux on Snapdragon, it's not really compatible right now, but we were able to get the Windows subsystem for Linux working. As far as booting into the actual OS, we were unsuccessful. As far as upgradeability, only the full-sized M.2 SSD and the battery are replaceable. The RAM and Wi-Fi card are soldered. So let's wrap. We like a couple variations of this laptop. For someone just doing light use, we feel the Qualcomm X2 Plus variant makes the most sense. It gives you this great laptop at a lower price since you don't need the extra performance of the X Elite chips. If you are looking at this laptop for performance tasks, we prefer the Intel X9 version for its excellent integrated GPU and less heat you feel. Be aware, HP laptops tend to go on massive sales, and we've already seen some good ones. At the time I filmed this video, both Intel ones are on sale over at Best Buy. Their prices are very competitive given the current market. I've linked that one and our favorite configs down below. You can also check our own website, BestLaptop.deals, to track sales in one place. When it comes to alternatives, Lenovo has their high-end Yoga Slim 7i Ultra. It has a better keyboard, it's lighter and more portable, and it feeds its Intel chip more power, which is relevant if you're getting one of the higher-end CPUs. The Yoga Slim 7X is their Qualcomm variant, and it has a better keyboard and feels cooler to the touch than the Qualcomm OmniBook. But it doesn't feel as well built, and its mechanical trackpad is worse. If you are considering a Qualcomm laptop, you should also be considering a MacBook. For light use, the MacBook Air is excellent, and until its price goes up, it remains the best value on the market. At the price of most of these OmniBooks, you can get the MacBook Pro 14. If you get the M5 Pro variant, it's a lot more powerful for things like programming and creator tasks, but it is bulkier, heavier, and Josh and I think it's not as pretty as the blue OmniBook. If you are doing gaming, though, there are definitely better options around this price. We expect the Yoga Pro 7i to be around the price of the highest-end models when on sale. The Pro 7i is a pretty compact 15-inch laptop with a dedicated GPU. It's not fed full wattage, but as we've shown you in our graphs, it performs substantially better than these laptops. Well, that's all we've got for you today. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you later.